In this video, we're going to explain the supply and demand, a concept of managerial economics. Why can't we always have everything we want exactly when we want it? Imagine a world where there's endless food, unlimited energy, or as much money as you could ever spend. Sounds great, right? But the reality is very different because of one key concept: scarcity. Scarcity means that the resources we rely on, like time, money, raw materials, or labor, are limited. At the same time, our desires and needs are virtually endless. Think about it. We might want the newest phone, a bigger house, or even just more time in the day, but there's always a limit to what's available. This scarcity forces us, both as individuals and as societies, to make choices. We have to decide how to allocate resources, and that's where two fundamental economic concepts come into play: supply and demand. Supply and demand are the forces that helps us understand how these choices are made in the market. They determine what's available, who can afford it, and ultimately how limited resources are distributed in the world around us.
Let's start with demand. Demand is all about consumers, you and me. It refers to the amount of a good or service that people are willing and able to buy at various prices over a specific period of time. Here's a simple example. Imagine the price of pizza drops to just $1 per slice. Suddenly, more people want pizza because it's cheaper and fits their budget. This is the law of demand, which says that there's an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. When prices go down, demand goes up, and vice versa. You can picture this with this graph. Price is on the vertical axis, quantity is on the horizontal axis, and the demand curve slopes downward. This downward slope shows that as prices fall, people want to buy more. Now, let's look at the other side of the equation, supply. Supply focuses on producers, those who make or sell goods and services. It refers to the amount of a good or service that sellers are willing and able to produce at various prices over a specific period of time. For instance, if the price of pizza rises to $10 per slice, pizza shops will want to make and sell more because they can earn higher profits. This is the law of supply, which states there's a direct relationship between price and quantity supplied. When prices go up, producers supply more, and when prices go down, they supply less. On a graph, the supply curve slopes upward, showing that as prices increase, producers are willing to provide more. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Supply and demand don't work in isolation. They interact to determine the price of goods in a market. The point where the supply and the demand curves meet is called the equilibrium point. This is where the market is in balance and the price is stable.
Now that we understand supply and demand, let's see how they work together to determine the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity in a market. The equilibrium is the point where the quantity demanded by consumers equals the quantity supplied by producers. In other words, is where the supply and demand curves intersect. If the market price is above equilibrium, we get a surplus, where supply exceeds demand. Producers will lower prices to sell the excess stock. If the market price is below equilibrium, we get a shortage, where demand exceeds supply. Only at the equilibrium price are supply and demand balanced, ensuring no surpluses or shortages. To calculate the equilibrium price and quantity numerically, we solve for the point where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. Here's how to approach it step by step. In the first step, to find the equilibrium, we set the two equations equal to each other because at equilibrium, quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. In the step 2, we solve for P, and we get an equilibrium price of $5.33. And in the last step, we solve for Q. The equilibrium quantity is 46.67 units.
These are some of the most common factors that cause the supply curve to shift, and we'll look at each one in detail. First, improved technology. When technology improves, firms become more efficient, reducing production costs. This allows business to produce more, so the supply curve shifts to the right. Next, higher wages. Higher wages increase the cost of production for business. With higher cost, supply decreases, causing the supply curve to shift to the left. Lower interest rates. When interest rates are low, borrowing becomes cheaper. This makes it easier for firms to invest in production, increasing supply and shifting the curve to the right. Higher prices for raw materials. If raw materials become more expensive, production costs go up. This discourages supply, shifting the curve to the left. Now, let's move on to some of the factors that influence demand. First, price of complement falls. When the price of complementary goods, like coffee and sugar, decreases, consumers are more likely to buy the related good. This increases demand, causing a rightward shift in the demand curve. Price of substitute falls. If the price of substitute goods like tea as an alternative to coffee decreases, consumers will switch to the cheaper substitute. This reduces demand for the original good, shifting the demand curve to the left. Income rises. For normal goods, those we buy more of when our income increases, a rising income leads to higher demand. The demand curve shifts to the right. For inferior goods, those we buy less of as our income increases, higher income actually reduces demand. This shifts the demand curve to the left.
The elasticity of demand. The price elasticity of demand tells us how much the quantity demanded will change when the price of a product changes. The formula to calculate it is the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. If the PET is greater than 1, the demand is elastic, meaning consumers are very responsive to price changes. If the PET is less than 1, the demand is inelastic, meaning consumers are not very responsive to price changes. And then, if the PET is equal to 1, the demand is unitary elastic, meaning the percentage change in quantity demanded is equal to the percentage change in price. In this first example, the change in quantity is higher than the change in price. Therefore, the PET is greater than 1, meaning that the demand is elastic. In this other example, the change in quantity is smaller than the change in price. Therefore, the PET is less than 1, meaning that the demand is elastic. Understanding elasticity helps businesses set prices. If demand is inelastic, they can raise prices to increase revenue. But if demand is elastic, raising prices might cause revenue to fall because consumers will buy much less. Governments use elasticity to predict the impact of taxes. For example, taxes on inelastic goods like cigarettes generate revenue without greatly reducing consumption.
Let's look at some of the main theories that influence whether demand for a product is elastic or inelastic. The first theory is the diminishing marginal utility theory, which states that as a consumer acquires more units of a good, the additional utility gained from each extra unit decreases. This impacts elasticity as follows. For goods where marginal utility decreases rapidly, consumers are more sensitive to price changes, increasing elasticity. For essential goods with high initial utility, such as basic food items, demand tends to be more elastic. The marginal utility can be expressed as the derivative as follows. The theory of closed substitutes states that elasticity is also influenced by the availability of substitute goods. According to this theory, the greater the number of substitutes available, the more elastic the demand, as consumers can easily switch from an expensive good to a cheaper alternative. The cross-price elasticity of demand measures the sensitivity of the demand for one good to changes in the price of another good. Finally, the Slatsky's theory, where the income effect and substitution effect explain how a price changes impacts the quantity demanded of a good. The substitution effect states that consumers replace more expensive goods with cheaper alternatives, while the income effect states that a change in price alters consumers' purchasing power, thereby affecting demand.
Now let's illustrate this with a real-life example.
Mr. Crank, I'm Randy Scanlon. We're selling Christmas trees again this year. Got yours right here.
You had a Canadian blue spruce last year, so this one's a real beauty, almost 10 feet tall. Mrs. Frank likes the big ones. Cute.
How much is the big one?
90. We had to go up a little.
We're not buying a Christmas tree this year.
Luther?
Shh, we talked about this. Hey!
Sorry we had to go up on the price.
We're making less per tree than last year.
It's not about the money. We're not doing Christmas this year. We're gonna go away on a cruise. We don't need a tree. Out of the frying pan and into the fire. Hey, I'm sorry about this little ugly bush.
Merry Christmas, Mr. Crank.
It is, isn't it?
Duke Scanlon.
Hi, Duke.
The same guy who brought you that beautiful Canadian blue spruce a few weeks back.
Okay, great. It was a great to have Merry Christmas to you. You know what? I need another blue spruce just like that. I really need a tree right now. What do you got left?
Just one.
Whoa, you know what? I like it. I'll take that.
Really?
Yeah, how much is it?
$75.
Says 15 right there.
Yeah, supply and demand.
It's kind of a ripoff, isn't it?
The Scouts could sure use your $75 donation for their camporee, Mr. Crank.
Hey, what do you guys say? I give you $25.
75 bucks. Take it or leave it.
Yours?
We are going to relate the concept with this video. This real-world example from the cranks illustrates how supply, demand, and elasticity interact in a market, particularly under time-sensitive circumstances. First, the supply for Christmas trees is finite and time-sensitive. Sellers typically prepare a set number of trees to meet expected holiday demand, but as the season progresses, the available stock diminishes. By the time Luther decides to buy a tree, it is close to Christmas, and the supply of trees is critically low. Limited supply near the end of the holiday season creates scarcity, which can drive up prices. Later, for the demand, initially the cranks planned to skip Christmas, so their demand for a tree was non-existent. However, when their daughter announces she's coming home, their circumstances changes, and they now urgently need a tree. This sudden increase in demand occurs when the market is already constrained by limited supply. An urgent and expected need for a product can lead to a willingness to pay a higher price. After, the elasticity measures how sensitive the quantity demanded is to changes in price. When demand is elastic, the consumers are price sensitive and might look for alternatives or decide not to buy if prices rise. And when the demand is inelastic, consumers are less sensitive to price changes because they need the product regardless of cost or alternatives. In this case, Luther's demand for a tree is inelastic because it's close to Christmas and there is no time to find a better deal or alternative. The emotional and social value of having a tree for his daughter outweighs the financial cost. As a result, Luther ends up paying a full price or even a premium for a support tree. In this case, the elasticity curve will look similar to the one in the picture. Last, with low supply and inelastic demand, sellers can charge prices higher without significantly reducing the number of sales. This explains why Luther couldn't negotiate a discount and had to pay a higher price for a less desirable tree. The interaction of supply, demand, and elasticity in this example shows how market conditions can lead to higher prices, especially when time constraints force buyers into inelastic demand.